Hello, everybody. Welcome back to our Utopias podcast. This is a very unique and interesting conversation I'm happy to share today that was recorded a little over a month ago on June 9th with Issam Hijazi. Issam has gotten a lot of attention because he created an alternative social media platform called UpScrolled, where algorithms do not dictate their consumption experience, but instead try to present all of us with a more open view of the world. This is critically important because UpScrolled, Issam himself is Palestinian, UpScrolled did not try to censor content coming from Gaza, coming from the genocide in that part of the world, but instead, at a time when TikTok was taken over by Larry Ellison and his son, David Ellison, who has had a huge amount of control over the media, including Paramount, when TikTok started shadow banning pro-Palestinian posts and content directly from Gaza and other parts of the world that, the heads of TikTok in the US decided to not want to show so widely, UpScrolled took over. So quickly gained 5 million users following freakouts over TikTok's deal with President Trump. And Issam is a very interesting person. He is a technologist of Palestinian, Jordanian, and Australian background, of course, of Palestinian descent. He's worked at IBM, Oracle, and Hitachi, and really has a view and a vision for technology that can truly support democracy and a real global understanding. So this is a very, very honest and deep and important conversation that I and Jawan Ali, who's part of our wonderful Utopias podcast team, had with Issam on June 9th, discussing UpScrolled, discussing the possibility of social media to get things right rather than to use algorithms to drive and polarize us, and the possibility of the internet being a space that actually allows us to see what is really true and what's happening around the world, and the larger goal and vision of technology as a force to build global community, global collaboration, global connections and understandings with one another. So this is a very fun conversation about big tech, about techno-fascism, about censorship, about the Trump administration and other administrations' attempts to control and direct technology to support anti-democratic outcomes. And you'll see how brave and courageous yet also accomplished Issam is in this conversation. So everybody, please enjoy this conversation with Issam Hijazi again, CEO and founder of UpScrolled. And as always, please rate, review, and subscribe and share our podcast with everybody. We are a non-commercial labor of love featuring many, many incredible voices that give us a certain kind of vision of life, of the present and of the future that is more abundant and less sort of deficit-centered. So that's what we're all about, and appreciate all of your support of Utopias again. Thank you.
Hello, everybody. My name is Jawan Ali, and I'm one of the editors here at the Utopias podcast. I am super excited to be able to share this interview that we conducted with Issam Hijazi, the founder of UpScrolled. I was really excited for the opportunity to co-host this interview because I, as a Gen Z person, am growing increasingly curious about how we go about navigating the world of social media, knowing full well that it is one of the most vital forces that connects my generation and even defines it. I mean, it's how we communicate with each other. It's responsible for so many of our friendships and communities. For many of us, it's a career even. And yet, it is also widely acknowledged as one of the most corrosive, destructive, manipulative forces, the effects of which are so obviously observable in the mental health and the psyche of pretty much anybody in my generation. Tech founders like Issam Hijazi fascinate me because they operate on a crucial intersection between fully acknowledging the vitality of these tools and wielding them responsibly in order to amplify forgotten voices or voices that are currently being censored, going back to the roots of what these technologies were meant to be, and fighting the good fight in making sure that such functionality is still widely available and popular and appealing and effective, while still fully acknowledging the harms of these things, being fully in tune with the growing movements to get off of smartphones, get off of social medias, touch grass. And I believe UpScrolled is a platform that operates crucially in the middle of all these things and handles its role extremely responsibly. And so it was such a treat to get under the hood and understand Issam's motivations, his story, his perspective on UpScrolled's positionality in the grand scheme of these types of tools and technologies, and his vision for the future of not only his own platform, but discourse on the internet, globalized discourse in general. So thank you all so much for checking this out. Thank you so much to the Utopias team for the opportunity to co-host this interview. I'm super excited for y'all to hear it. And as always, thank you so much for supporting the podcast.
This is a real true honor. I consider Issam Hijazi a new friend, and certainly someone whose work and whose practice really inspires me and our entire Utopias podcast team. So I'm very, very happy to welcome the founder and CEO of UpScrolled, but more importantly than just being like someone involved with technology, a really good human being, Issam, to join the Utopias podcast today. Thank you so much for joining us, Issam.
Thanks, Ramesh and Joanne, for having me, and good to see you again, albeit virtually, Ramesh.
Absolutely. And I'm very happy also to welcome Jawan Ali, who is a former student of mine, but more importantly, an awesome, awesome person who's critical part of our Utopias podcast team to do this interview with me today. Thank you, Jawan, also for joining both of us today.
Very happy to be here. Thank you.
Awesome. All right. So we'll get rocking. I want to start with, sort of a basic question that we ask all of our guests, which is to just ask you, Issam, a little bit about your own background. So I know you're Palestinian, Jordanian, and I also know that, as you and I have talked about, many of us have been staring at what we feel is an incredible moral stain on our culture. On our nation being, I'm a U.S. citizen, but on many nations, in terms of, sort of letting this genocide happen and sort of continuing this genocide toward the Palestinian peoples, which obviously is explicitly in Gaza, but I think extending in many other ways as well. So that's a heavy way to start. But I guess I just want to ask you about some of your own moral upbringing, the ways in which you grew up, and then your connections to technology in an earlier stage in your life.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Ramesh. Well, as you mentioned, I'm originally from Palestine, from a city north of Palestine called Safad. I was born in Jordan. I'm not able to visit Palestine, nor my family can, unfortunately. And the history started really back in 1948 when my ancestors, my grandparents, really had to flee a war zone that happened back then, which we called Nakba. And they thought in their mind that this is going to be a temporary, they're just going to leave their house for a couple of days, just, to shelter somewhere and then be back again. And that was not really the story and what happened. So they had to flee from one country to another. They started with Lebanon, they moved to Syria, they ended up in Jordan, and at some point of time, they could go back to Palestine, but not to their hometown, to a city called Ariha. But that was temporary for a few years. And then another war kicked in again, 1967. And that's when they had to flee again, and they settled in Amman in Jordan. And that's been home for them since then. And that's basically how and why I was born in Amman, Jordan. As into my career, I've been working with technology since very, very young age. Since 12 years old, I started coding. So that was a natural hobby, let's call it that way. I started my entrepreneurial journey since then. And I've done bachelor degrees in computer science. And naturally, I started working with some of the tech companies, global ones across the world. Not proudly anymore, because some of those companies are unfortunately complicit in bad things happening around the world, in the genocide to be specific. One of them is Oracle. I worked there for 5 years. I didn't really know much about what's happening behind the scenes with the executive level, what kind of deals was happening. But throughout the last 3 years, I think there has been awakening globally, and that was one of the people who also came to learn and understand how these organizations really operate. I did work with other companies as well across multiple countries, multiple continents. Last one was before the current Australia, and recently me and the company as well as the family have relocated to the Netherlands, to Amsterdam, where we run and operate UpScrolled.
Incredible. So, I think one of the things I just want to emphasize right at the start for everyone who's listening and viewing this is technologies are not neutral, nor are technology companies. Obviously, many technology companies, by their very definition, are in the interest of, serving profit revenue motives and or investor motives. But outside of that, there is a moral calculus that technology companies and technology itself expresses. And that's something that is commonly discussed with many of our guests here on our Utopias podcast. And when we talk about Oracle in particular, we're speaking about someone, I'm sitting here in Silicon Valley, Issam, right now as we speak. Oracle was known as sort of, think about it, even the word Oracle, like, sort of predicting the future, looking to the future, the Oracle of Delphi, right? And all of this. But
Yeah.
Oracle was sort of known as a little bit, its founder or its CEO, Larry Ellison, was known as a little bit of a fringy, hyper-libertarian, anti-regulation kind of figure, a little bit Ayn Randian figure when I was young, when I I'm not that young anymore, but anyway, when I was in college and all of this, but it was seen as a fringe company, not the company that has been handed the keys in many ways to Trump's sort of vision of AI, not the company whose son, David Ellison, is running now Paramount, which runs CBS and is now literally censoring and taking many people off of television, including Scott Pelley from 60 Minutes, Stephen Colbert, many others. So I think this is important because I want to ask you, you have now founded UpScrolled, which Jawan's going to ask you about further in a moment, which has record numbers of people flocking to your social media platform. It's obviously an incredibly different platform, but could you speak to how a certain kind of political or moral set of values might have influenced you in deciding to create your own company rather than continuing to work for the likes of Oracle?
Good question. Let's ask the question: who do you think is big fan of Larry Ellison?
President Trump?
Well, yes, of course, but from the tech industry, from the big tech industry.
That's a great question. I would guess Sequoia Capital and Mr. Peter Thiel, the Founders Fund kind of figures. I went to college with some of those guys, Issam. I don't know if I told you that yet. That's my guess, but please.
And well, in addition to those, Elon Musk. I don't
Oh
know. In a
gosh.
recent interview, he was asked who does he think of genius people, and I think Larry Ellison came as the only person on that list, among other billionaires in the U.S. But that tells you something, right? The kind of people that we're dealing with, and this is really where and why I thought of starting UpScrolled, because not only me, a lot of people are frustrated of existing social media platforms and the way they treat their users. They treat them as the product, literally. They're not providing them value. They are extracting value from the users, in addition to running propagandas, political propagandas that serves certain individuals, across the world. The triggering moment for me, Ramesh, for starting UpScrolled was when I started to see the selective censorship, the selective shadow banning of certain content, of certain users, or certain content creators on different platforms, in different mainstream platforms. And I was one of the people who were frustrated about this specific fact. And to me, that moment was when the Gaza genocide unfolded. I was posting on those platforms and I was asking my friends around the world who lived in US, who lived in Europe and elsewhere, do you see the content that I'm posting? Are you aware of what's happening? And their answers were very short and simple: no. They did not know what's happening and they could not see my content. And I've seen this not only on the content that I was posting or reposting, but from prominent big accounts that had millions and millions of followers, and overnight, some of those accounts were completely banned on those platforms for violating the policies of those platforms. And when you look at the platform, it's full of actual violations, and the actual violators are still on those platforms and getting more traction and engagement. So that was the triggering moment for me of why don't we have a platform that is different? When I say different, I'm not talking technical different. I mean different from every single aspect, from people who are running it, from the way it operates, the principles it stands on, and the vision, and putting users first. I haven't seen those in any platforms. Well, they put it in the marketing materials, but in reality, in practice, they don't really apply it. So that was the triggering point for me for starting UpScrolled.
And so with that, I mean, obviously, as someone who's very Gen Z and who is very much raised on the internet, it was truly a sight to behold, the algorithmic sort of polarization of the especially the events following October 7th, and how certain news feeds were just seeming to get polluted by various algorithms. And so obviously, out of a desire to advocate for people and real stories, you go on to design an alternative social media platform. And so I was wondering, first and foremost, if you could just get into the nitty-gritty about what using UpScrolled is like, especially knowing that there were deliberate decisions that went into the user interface and how it differentiates itself as a social media platform from the more algorithmic behemoths like X and TikTok. So what is the experience? What is the user experience of UpScrolled like, and what are the behind the scenes decisions that went into that user experience?
Yeah, good question, Joanne. From user experience, we try to create something that feels similar, familiar to users who are migrating from the other platforms into UpScrolled. So if you use UpScrolled today, you'll find it as a hybrid of X as well as Instagram. And people joke about this, saying it's like Instagram married X and have a child. That's what UpScrolled really feels like. So you'll have the functionalities of being able to express yourself in writing, in photos, in videos, following your favorite creators, organizations, and so on, and actually have an authentic connection with them. In terms of algorithm, we don't really operate with one, or let me rephrase that. We don't have a sophisticated algorithm that really push content on your feed just because we or the platform or someone think this is what you like or this is what you should be seeing. We designed the platform deliberately to have the chronological feed by design. And chronological is, you told me you're Gen Z. Hopefully, you remember how X or Twitter back in the day was when it started. It was pretty much the content of the people that you follow, and then people recommend other people, and you follow them because you trust them, and so on. So you created your community. You were able to see what's happening. You were able to see what's trending around the world based on the conversation that's happening. And it's as simple as that. We wanted to have this within UpScrolled, as in giving you, the user, the control of what content you want to see without having any manipulation, without amplifying any users for any reason whatsoever. That's really one of the differentiating features of UpScrolled. It's lack of feature in a way. We don't have, again, the sophisticated recommendation algorithm that pushes content on your app 24/7. And this is called, why other platforms do this is because they want to keep you hooked on the platform as long as they can. So no matter what you get from that, value, no value, mostly no value, they don't care. They just want you to stay there so they can profit more through ads and different ways, understanding your behavior and selling your data when needed, as we are all aware of with some platforms. Unlike that, we're not really designing for that, which I know sounds counterproductive, especially for investors, that, hey, we actually want our users to go out and touch the grass. We want them to go and have normal conversation. We want them to use the app, but not for hours. We want them to log in, see what's happening, post something if they want to, and then just go and do life, because there's more life to life than just being behind your mobile screen 24/7. I don't want, as a father, to have my one child now, maybe I'll have more later, to grow with that, as in to get everything that she needs from those applications, and I knowing that these applications or those platforms manipulate the content, and manipulate the way you think, and this is really the differentiating, I would say, feature of UpScrolled compared to the others.
Of course, yeah, and it appears that yeah, you're going up against an unscalable sort of a monster with those algorithms being designed particularly to create addictions. And this is not even a vast conspiracy theory. This is such mainstream knowledge that it's actually the subject of a drama film I just saw a trailer for yesterday about known as The Social Reckoning. And so with that, what does knowing that it, as you alluded to, it's not the most profitable path forward to allow this to be a less addictive, more open discourse, open forum platform, much like internet forums of the past, much like more early versions of platforms like Twitter. What does success or a successful Upscrolled look like to you? What is your dream version of this application? What are the conversations that you want to be seeing on there? Yeah, overall, broadly, how would you describe like if Upscrolled as something that is successful? And obviously, we've seen it grow tremendously. I mean, it's got such an astonishing user base already. People flocked to it in the wake of the very censorship that you saw and wanted to liberate them from. But yeah, what does Upscroll as a successful product look like to you?
So when it comes to profitability, you still can make a lot of profit without really having these addiction loops designs in the app. Addiction loops is not only bad because they keep you addicted, because it hurts your mental health. It hurts the way you think about things. Algorithm not only, I mean, those algorithms not only make you addicted for stuff that matter or doesn't matter, but it also shape the way you think about things. I think that's the dangerous part. I mean, all of them are dangerous, but this is also very dangerous. It changes your perspective into politics, into certain matter that's happening in the world, and they shift those algorithms to play with propaganda, like I mentioned to you earlier. Now, success to Upscroll does not mean the ultimate profitability. Of course, we want to be a profitable company because, one, we have people that's working for us and we need to pay them, and we want to be a successful company overall, and that will happen, but that's not going to be on the cost of people well-being. And this is important. With other platforms, there's greediness, as in they reach certain profitability and they said, okay, so what can we do more without really worrying about users? We don't care about their well-being or mental health or anything. How can we make more money? We don't want to be that. That's really the evil, one of the evil parts of their plan. So success to us means, of course, growing in numbers of users, increasing the engagements, and becoming maybe someday a mainstream platform, but an ethical mainstream platform where people are giving equal power to express themselves, where there are no addiction loops within the app just to keep them hooked for the sake of profitability or getting as much out of them. This is really the end goal. We want to become big. We want to allow all people of all kinds without any saying discrimination whatsoever of people because of their ethnicity or where they come from or how they think about things. We want them all to come to Upscroll and be able to be themselves, feel safe to express themselves without the worry of censorship and without, behind the scene, again, hurt their mental health or well-being in general.
It's It's really quite something, Issam, because, I was teaching a class just not long ago called Data, Justice, and Society. And it was really notable to me because, many of my colleagues, or I was co-teaching the class, they would talk about data and injustice from hundreds of years ago, which is very relevant when we want to look at the East India Tea Company colonization, want to look at W.E.B. Du Bois and visualizations of racism and kind of apartheid type state in America. But it was also incredible that they were speaking about it in this way, or that the class was being taught in this way while a genocide was occurring, and is occurring um, in Gaza. And when it was my turn to lecture, I was saying, hey, well, we actually have a lot of questions around data and injustice, and even the use of data to calculate what is considered okay in terms of collateral damage and people that could be murdered. Right now, in front of our eyes, we're looking at data and injustice right in front of our eyes right now. And a number of my students, even though there was some pressure for us to, gag ourselves, as you know, a number of my students came up to me and said, just thanks for keeping it real. And I don't even use TikTok. But a lot of them were saying that they were used on TikTok before Larry Ellison acquired at least part of it in the US side of it.
50%.
50%, 50%. Yeah. And we were all really hoping it wasn't going to be him, but of course it was. This was announced clearly on day 3 of this administration, with Trump arm in arm with Ellison and Sam Altman with the so-called Stargate AI initiative, not creating any jobs at all, though they say that it's going. So they were seeing on TikTok what was occurring and is occurring, until all of a sudden, boom, it's like it never occurred. So this is setting me up for, I think, a very critical question that I know you care about and I want to ask you about, which is journalism and what do we do about it? So this has been a 10-year plus story in the making, the fragmentation of a public sphere where, Issam and Ramesh and Jawan, we all get our news from a similar set of sources. Of course, there'll be some Fox News versions of this, and there'll be stuff like, The Guardian, or even further, Democracy Now! Or stuff like that, but at the same time, the set of sources is kind of finite. And on some level, we knew where we could get our information from. It doesn't, and there was some common basis of reality, or at least accounting for reality or reporting on reality, which seems critical for journalism, right? But now all 3 of us could be very similar demographically, even politically, but be presented with completely non-redundant, non-overlapping worlds. Like it's so this drives insanity. And there's no democracy without dialogue and disagreement, but there's also no democracy without some common basis of reality. And okay, so I truly believe that social media is crushing and annihilating journalism. And I know you care deeply about journalism, and you're trying to design UpScrolled to be, at least on some part, from when we talked about it, to be some sort of revival of journalism. How do we get there? I mean, that's not your responsibility, my friend. But at the same time, we all in it together to try to revive democracy. What's it going to take for digital technologies, including UpScroll, to actually support something that's real and journalistic?
Beautiful question. I think if you look back in history on the journey of journalism, it started with newspapers, started then with news media outlets on TV controlled by governments. Then we've started to see private companies who are currently owned by billionaires like the Allisons and so on. And there's something in common. They always want to control the information that goes to people, because if they can control the minds of the people, then they can do anything, really. And social media is currently part of that. And the acquisition of the Allisons to TikTok in the US is a big part of that. they stated that, I mean, Netanyahu in some of the public conferences, that TikTok is going to be the new war zone warfare place where they need to really work on. And he was surrounded by influencers, which we all know are being paid to really get certain narrative out, again, to manipulate people. And if you look at the TikTok deal, one of the conditions to make it happen was to retrain the algorithm. And you don't buy something with billions just to recreate it or retrain it. You buy it because it's good. But in their case, they wanted to buy it in order to control the narrative of the US populations. What I found fascinating is that the Allisons, with this 15% ownership and their vast investments in networks like CBS, HBO, Channel 5 in the UK, even CNN, Warner Bros. And Paramount and Max and this and that, they're controlling 170 million Americans. That's huge. Now, people, the good thing, I think the good thing, people are much more aware of what's happening around them, and they know that they can get information elsewhere. There are multiple social media platforms today, including UpScrolled, and each find their niche there because they like to find their community and people that they align with, and they have the conversation there. I believe journalism is going in a direction where it's going to be independent. If you look currently, there's so many journalists have started their own networks, which are very small, independent, like Zeteo, like the Young Turks, and others. And these have huge fan base. They have millions, in some cases 30 million plus. And I started to see more of this happening. And the way they run their network is by utilizing all available channels to reach everyone they can, whether that's from those platforms that we just mentioned, or UpScrolled, or running their own infrastructure and broadcasting to people. So people now do have choices to go into the platform that feels more aligned to them, and then get their news from there. But the dangerous part is that these other platforms are controlled by the people that or organization that we've just mentioned, and they're going to continue increase the censorship, or at some point deactivate or eliminate those creators from those platforms. And I started to have those conversations with a few journalists, and my advice to them was, don't put all your eggs in one basket. You need to make sure that you always distribute your content across multiple channels, because there's no guarantees that your 5-10 million followers today on some platform will still be tomorrow. So start building on other platforms before that day comes. Use that platform to let your other followers know that you exist elsewhere. For example, on UpScrolled, where it aligns more with your values. So I think journalism is going to be more independent in general, and away from all these I don't know, we can call it old school media outlets, and moving in this direction where people are choosing where they want to watch the content that they are interested in, or the information that they want to keep up with.
Yeah, it also raises a huge and quite interesting, I think, design question that is sort of philosophically, morally, and politically motivated, which is, what would the design of any technology look like, or a media ecology look like, that could integrate, a range of perspectives, but all those perspectives are based on some kind of reporting of reality, right? So we can look at, what we all believe is a genocidal set of actions, but there could be different, oh, well, wait a second, there could be perspectives on it. And I guess the issue is, there's a fragmentation, right? We have, Mehdi Hassan and the Young Turks, our friends, because we share some of their views, and we do think that they try to actually account and actually tell more of the truth, which I do believe is also correct. but at the same time, there's this fragmentation. I think that's one of the big challenges of our times, which is how to figure out a way to weave voices together, because that's what the whole darn internet and the web was supposed to be about, right? It was supposed to be about global voices informing one another, different perspectives informing one another.
Hmm.
There was a study, Issam, you may be familiar with it, that came out shortly after the election of Trump, this 2.0, hellscape we're living through here. But is which basically was a Media Matters study. It showed that, and this was shocking to a lot of folks, that the online so-called ecosystem what had skewed very much to kind of right-wing influencers, somewhere like these Joe Rogan types who sort of somewhat supported Bernie Sanders back in a few years ago. Kind of
Hmm.
amoral figures, I would say, kind of odd figures.
Hmm.
But then some were like these sort of comedians who kind of somehow all of a sudden took this route, like Theo Vaughn or these kinds of people. And the study showed that the only kind of progressive response that had any sort of traction online at that time were the Young Turks, actually. And this was before Mehdi Hassan, of course, started Zeteo and some of these other examples. They had like
Hmm.
like bubbles of the amount of visibility. So I want to ask you just this question with UpScrolled. So you all have grown spectacularly. What do you feel like it's going to take for you all to sustain your growth, sustain your numbers, or even grow further? I know it's not all about growth, it's about doing things the right way, as we've discussed. But how are you all trying to maintain sort of a vision of long-term presence, given, as well as anybody, there have been a few examples of social media alternatives because all of us, the vast majority of us are really dislike big tech, including many Republicans, by the way. Um, but it's being foisted on us. We don't know what else to do. And there's so many people on these platforms, it's hard to join a new one. So we've seen a few, alternatives introduced and then flame out. How are you all trying to think about maintaining a long-term presence so you can actually be a real, more journalistic, more ethical, yet profitable alternative to these big tech platforms?
I believe one of the hardest challenges is changing human behaviors. Currently, people are used to the existing platforms and how they operate, and to make them unlearn that this is not the right way to do things is going to be one of the most difficulties that we and maybe other social media platforms, if there are new ones, will have to face. For me, I believe to continue growing is we need to focus on two things. One, the product. I believe in great products really market themselves. We haven't paid anything for marketing, and we're not intending to push for promotion or anything similar to acquire users. I believe if you have a good product and you continue to enhance it, then that's your number one base. Now the second one is to continue be a principled company, as in really having a stance, continue to live by your values, your mission, and deliver on it. And if you have the combination of those, ultimately people will come and use your product or your service or your alternative that you're trying to create of what's out there. So this is what we're currently focused on. We're not really focused much on the monetization aspect of the platform, although we have plans for it, which we can talk about later on. But we want to create a great product, a great experience. And at some point, although currently we're trying to mimic, copy what other platforms have, we will come up with differentiating features on the platform that would set us apart. That people would say, oh, if you want to do this, then UpScrolled is the only platform is currently offering that, and maybe the other platform will start copying us at some point. So there will be an element of R&D. I don't know the answer today. Social media is not an easy challenge as people might think. There's a lot of things happening behind the scenes, and to get into the innovation space requires a lot of focus, investment as well, time and money. But we're building towards that. So yeah, I guess combination of product innovation and staying principled as a company is what would have or continue um, being the growth fuel for UpScrolled. And thinking about this, I believe counting on events that would get people to understand more how unethical other platform is, to get them migrate into more ethical platforms will be something that we're also betting on. And then once that happens, you have what's called the network effect. And network effect, if you're there, then your friends will join, and if your friends join, then their friends will join, and so on. And that becomes sort of an organic mechanics of how social media platforms. What's interesting to state here is, like I mentioned in the beginning, we haven't paid anything for promotion, and the growth that we have seen, the surge that we have seen in the millions and millions of users, is something happened completely and absolutely organic, which doesn't happen usually. Usually, other platforms are backed by millions or backed by influence, or being in the Silicon Valley. With us, it was literally a one-person company, the one that you're looking at. We were in very far place, that's in Australia, but we made it because people, again, were sick and tired of the same faces, same playbook, and same ownership class with the other platforms, and they've seen something different in UpScrolled, and that's made them migrate there.
Gives me a little bit of hope, man. It's like people have a desire for some authenticity. And when I arrived in Doha and I met you, I was really happy to see that the opening keynote of the Web Summit, which has thousands and thousands of people attending, was you with with Patty on Patty Cosgrove, sort of celebrating what you are achieving. Just very quick question about some of the features, if you are able to share any of them. What would be some of the design features? Just because many of our listeners are actually very interested in technology design. What would be some of the features that you would design or you are designing on? I know you alluded to some onto UpScroll that actually are more, trusting and actually respecting of us as technology users.
No, no, of course. So again, we want to provide users with the tools to enable them to express themselves the way that they like. Some people like to express themselves in videos. Some people like to do that in recorded or live format. Some people like to use images. Some like to write or to do microblogging. Some like to write essays, and so on. So we want to provide all these tools and elements to enable our users to express themselves the way that they prefer. We want to provide them with functionalities that help them to build their communities, as in small community with people talking about certain topics. For example, we want to create a functionality where you have a YouTube-like experience where you are able to have episodes of videos or audio like this podcast, for example, and having people coming there just to watch it and subscribe to your content. And this leads me to the monetization aspects, because we want to reward our users. We want to reward the content creators. We want to have them be part of our success in a way. So we will be creating certain things to encourage them to continue create content by having other users subscribe to their content, and then us taking a small commission, and then the creators themselves to keep the big portion, as an example, in addition to the engagements and so on. But we will always design those in a way that is not um, uh, uh, not addictive to the end users. So we want to partner with those content creators to create that kind of space for users, for their followers, and continue on building on our mission.
Wonderful. Joanne, over to you.
Yeah, so last time I logged into UpScrolled, I saw a post actually saying that for some reason or another, I don't know how much you're able to speak about this right now, but for some reason or another, UpScrolled was banned in Saudi Arabia. And that leads me to have a question, just generally speaking, about one, well, your thoughts on that particular situation, but also the idea of uh, the fact that with freedom of speech, with allowing people so much freedom to express themselves in whatever way they possible, and not feeding into the desires of these big tech algorithms and their agendas and the agendas and opinions of their founders. there are compromises that you might have to make ultimately in order to allow your platform to be as authentic as its mission states that it should be. So I was just wondering if you would be able to speak on, what you foresee those compromises being. What ground are you willing to stand on in the wake of stuff like that, knowing that you may, ultimately risk being banned in certain countries? Or I'm assuming I have also seen that you've been, shot down, labeled as, from like Anti-Defamation League or something, a bad rep coming your way for whatever reason, for you not, filling the pockets of whoever it is was begging you to and you refused to.
Well, I guess no platform or nobody gets censored because nobody is using it. So this is reaffirmation or confirmation that we're doing something different, and this is maybe a concern for certain individuals, organizations, and so on. This is why you've seen some of maybe those articles or attacks on UpScrolled. Now, when it comes to the Saudi ban itself, we discovered the problem approximately 2 months ago, maybe 2 months, 10 days, where some users starting to send us messages or tweet from X or other platforms saying we're not able to log in into our account anymore. And then they started to leave bad reviews on the App Store and Google Play Store, that they're not able to use it, thinking that we've done something from our end to not let them use the platform. At that point, we did not really make any assumptions whatsoever. So we went through the route of investigations, which took us a long time, just to get the confirmation that there has and there's still a certain ban from certain commission in Saudi to block UpScrolled service, so not to allow users or people in Saudi to use the platform itself. And this came after technical investigations with some of our tech vendors and one of the telecom companies in Saudi, just to confirm that this is coming from certain commission, but they didn't know anything about it. Currently, we're trying to reach out to the authorities through the right channels and hoping for them to really respond to us. There has been no response yet, but we're hopeful. We want to really resolve this. We want to have our users everywhere in the world really give them the opportunity to use the platform and be able to use it. So we're here to really have a constructive dialogue with whoever really willing to speak to us. And I'm hoping that at some point is going to happen soon.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. No, as you said earlier, you wouldn't have had this problem in the first place if you didn't already have uh, a user base. Um, so with that, what are you seeing? This kind, I guess, a bit of a tangential question, but how would you categorize the user base on UpScrolled right now? What are the types of things that they say? How do people typically engage with the platform? And is this similar or different to what you've seen on mainstream social media? I personally feel like it harkens back to the earliest internet forums that I was browsing when I was just a child. So it's kind of a callback to the old days in a brand new landscape that's been sort of tarnished. What are you seeing?
We see all sorts of people on the platform. So the topest users in terms of country is the US, followed by Europe, followed by some countries in the Middle East, including Saudi, including Egypt, and small pockets here and there. And they're really coming from all walks of life, Joanne, with people from politically speaking on the right, on the left. We have Tucker Carlson as an example. We have people on the left as well. On the platform, we have different news outlets like Al Jazeera and smaller ones across the world. And we have regular users who post about their walk in the park, but we have also users who are avid on all things political. So they will talk about the Palestinian issues or what's happening in the U.S. with the ICE or the billionaires and all these. So it's really a combination of all. But if you ask me today, it's probably mostly on the political side of things, because that's the reason that made them move in the first place, because they were censored elsewhere. Because let's be honest here, if you're posting cats videos and pictures and you're browsing about the parties happening in Berlin or whatever, then you won't have real problem with the existing platform. But once you start talking about real issues that's happening in this society, that's where you start to feel, something is wrong with this platform. I'm not able to see what I want to see, or my content is not reaching the people, or the platform is taking out and putting me on strikes or deactivating my account altogether just for speaking up. So all these people who have been experiencing those issues are mostly the early users, I would say, of UpScrolled, and that's what made the current shape of the conversation on the platform. But that being said, I know these existing users who are also very political understand that this can't only be about politics. So we see them every now and then trying to push for different kind of content just to encourage other users for into coming into the platform. So we started to see shift in content that is, I would call, normal, not mostly political, starting happening on the platform. I will continue to invest in providing, like I mentioned early on, tools and ways for them to continue to do that in the form and the way that they prefer.
Yeah, and regardless, yeah, it's a shame that, I mean, it's wonderful that you're giving them that platform to be able to share whatever it is, especially their most controversial opinions, controversial in the mainstream of social media. But it's a shame that they might risk, seeing that not play into the favors of, certain countries, certain institutions that don't want to hear those voices. But it's good. Thank you for amplifying them with your platform. Over to you, Ramesh.
Absolutely. What you were just sharing there, Issam, with Jawan, those such great, important questions you're asking, is how, we often think about the internet as like everything is accessible everywhere. Obviously, there is profound amounts of censorship of various internet technologies tied to different nation states, but also these platforms themselves engage in a lot of, many different kinds of censorship in their own ways, in the sense that, for example, here in the United States, we've seen some examples of people trying to create apps so that we can track where ICE, these ICE, so-called ICE officers, who I think of as pretty much paramilitaries, are where they're going, what they're doing, just kind of crowdsourcing apps. And Apple, whatever that's called, the iTunes store, and then and Google, the Google store, they have deplatformed many of these apps. And so there are these regimes of power that determine what is or is not accessible. And I just think it's really important what you just said there about how UpScrolled isn't about presenting a partisan worldview. UpScrolled is about letting everyone just get a chance to speak and hear from one another. Everyone, could be Tucker Carlson too, who, to his credit, is taking on some anti-Zionist perspectives. So it's so that is important, right? Is to see a way forward as supporting all voices and voices that can inform and support one another. That's not a partisan left, kind of progressive, quote unquote, woke caricature of what actual progressivism is about. And I just want to really compliment you and let you, just mention to you that I really admire you and respect you for that. I want to ask you a question before Jawan asks our final question, which is, something you and I have talked about briefly, Issam, which are, the legacies of this whole discussion of the importance or lack of importance in technology, including AI and social media technologies, in supporting actual collective action, social movements, people actually standing up and trying to change things for the better. And as we've discussed, between 2011 and 2013, some people don't even remember that these things existed. There were a wave of pro-democracy movements and revolutions starting in Tunisia, and Mohammed Bouazizi, and then kind of heading into Egypt and in other parts of the Arab world. This was just called the Arab Spring. And, I had spent quite a bit of time in 2011, 2012, 2013 living in Egypt and writing about the Arab Spring and doing a lot of work with Al Jazeera at that time. And the whole narrative that I was trying to explore was a narrative that was circulating on the cover of Time magazine and so on, which was, basically social media revolution. This was described as the Twitter revolution, Facebook revolution. And what was barely implicit, but pretty much stated was our technologies. This was Silicon Valley at that time, which was less explicitly fascist and kind of Trumpian and, just sort of grifty. Um, it was like our technologies will liberate you, which is like really Orientalist and very Edward Said, and actually really sort of basically expressing that you Arab people, this is what I believe was being said. You guys can't be democratic yourselves. You can't change your own nations and worlds for the better. Never mind all these like autocratic, authoritarian military goons that were supported by the United States State Department and so on. So this was something I was looking at firsthand. And, my research was showing that the social movements had very little to do with social media. And in many cases, social media was making people sort of just fragmented. But there were people using, in a very tactical way, social media to drive new audiences and drive actually mobilization. Mobilization doesn't just mean physically putting your body in harm's way. There are many types of protests. So I wanted to just ask you, now we're talking now in 2026, 15 years after this first wave of movements. And, we saw Occupy after, and there have been others, right? I mean, in some ways, the Make America Great Again Trump thing is a social movement, as distasteful as it is to many of us. Black Lives Matter. There are other movements. What do you make of this question? I'm just curious how you think through this, and in particular, UpScrolled, if any relevance UpScrolled has to this question of what, if any, role is there for technology, especially social media, in relation to actual collective action, actual democratic change? Curious what you think about that. It's a difficult question, but I've always wanted to ask you that.
You took me back 13 years ago to the Arab Springs time. That quote about Silicon Valley is liberating the Arabs is very, very interesting. Very interesting, not in a good way though.
No.
Because the real question is, those same platforms owners are the same people who are trying to change the narrative in the US. So we know who controls what and for what reason or what purpose. So the real question is, or was that any different 13 years ago from today? That's number one. Number two, the surveillance that they do by collecting so many data points about their users is something used in intelligence. And this intelligence have been handed to certain regimes across the world when required to do certain actions. So the real question is, have they actually liberated the Arabs? And if so, in what ways? The real question, how much destruction that they have done. And I'm not only talking about social media platform, but all kind of other technologies which we are currently seeing now being used on innocent people, like the genocide in Gaza, but probably elsewhere around the world, to kill and target civilians by using such technologies. So social media is not only the ones where we post images and videos, it's also the ones that we send messages through. And these are heavily surveilled platforms and tools, and people don't really understand how dangerous they are and how bad governments would intercept connections and have full control of the data and metadata of the users that they are using them, and then they can be used against them. And how, again, certain regimes and governments across the world have direct connections with some of those social media platforms and control them in a way to ask them, hey, we don't like that person. We don't want to see their content in our country, for example. So it tells you that they're not really, they were not, and they're not really here to liberate any people, whether that's Americans, or whether that's Arab. They're really here to control narrative and change narrative to what works. Now, what works, I don't know the answer, because it's if I know the answer, then we'll have much more peace in the world. But there's so many things that's happening behind the scenes that it's not easy for us to crack or understand how they work. But history just tell you one thing: they've been used in destructive way, in negative way, and now they are using the same methods on the American people. So I don't think it was a tool that was a gift from the West or Silicon Valley to liberate Arabs, but the other way around.
And very much could be a Trojan horse as well, the so-called gift, right? And such a key point though about how so-called free participation, you can organize, share things, spread things to the world using our technology, is actually bait and switch, Trojan horse for data tracking, micro targeting, obviously in algorithmic ways, but the ways in which you use data and metadata, key point you made, which is what Snowden exposed with the National Security Agency. It was metadata during the Obama administration, mind you, which was when the Arab Spring also started, for tracking and targeting, right? So what an intimate system of surveillance that could support the regimes of, at that time, even at the time of the Arab Spring, Issam, the biggest lobbyist in Washington, D.C. was Google. This is during the Obama administration. So tracking, targeting, and all has occurred in neoliberal and neo-fascist regimes.
And it's getting worse. It's not getting better. That's really what worries me now as a father. It really worries me. It's getting worse with the advancements in the AI and how everyone is using the likes of ChatGPT, Claude, and other LLMs. These models, these companies now, in some cases, know more about us than our families, more than our friends, because people ask them all sorts of questions, share all sorts of information, and just feeding the machine and getting them to know more about them. And it's changing also the way that they think, because now I know it's a different topic from social media, but it's still related to big tech
Absolutely.
and the control
Absolutely.
of these companies. Those AI platforms give you the answers without having you to do a research, and it bugs the hell out of me when I ask someone something and they tell me, "Oh, ChatGPT told me so," or "ChatGPT said so," and they take it for granted, like this is the holy book, this is the Quran, this is the Bible. It cannot be wrong. It's 100% right, without having them to do an effort to really search for the truth. And we all know that ChatGPT and the others is just huge amount of data that has been controlled and fine-tuned and changed in ways to give you responses. And if you ask it certain questions, it answers in one way and others in some other way. And that's why it's dangerous, because Joanne, you're Gen Z, you used Google. Now people will stop using Google, which I thought was lazy enough rather than going to books and reading in libraries, but still was better than using technologies like ChatGPT and Claude, because at least you could go to links to pages, read different, and then make your decision, make your thought, make your opinion about something. Now, you just take it for granted. One line, one paragraph, the AI said it, so it should be true. And that's very destructive. It will make people, unfortunately, more stupid in general, but it will also shape their opinion and the way they think about lives and things that matters in the world.
Over to you, Jawan, for our final question. Yeah, thank you.
Sure, yeah. To overuse a tired phrase, we've entered a bit of a dystopia in the ChatGPT age, and the way it's just been, so massively adopted, and how people find it to be so useful in puzzling ways.
Mhm.
But of course, you are being featured on a podcast called Utopias. And so with that, we ask we ask every
Nicely
guest
done.
at the end. Thank you. We like to ask every guest at the end, what do you imagine your tech utopia to be? You being someone who's, at the forefront, at the cutting edge of this broader movement away from big tech, away from big social media. Uh, so with that, you're operating in this plane. You're treading new ground here. So if you were to dream up your utopia, what does it look like?
And here, just an
From
interjection.
technology.
We're
Yeah.
to take the term utopia and utopias, title of the podcast, away from techno utopians who often present their views of tech and utopia as just like basically becoming RoboCop or the Blade Runner or whatever it is, or like, Elon Musk and a few other like white people being able to live forever or live in a bunker or live in another planet. We're trying to think about other utopias or from all of us. Yeah, so thank you,
Yeah.
Issam.
No, no, fair question. And, interesting one. I think um, when technology, including UpScrolled or else, start to really care about the well-being of their users without prioritizing profits, without having any alternative motives behind the scenes for you using it, when it's really directed for you to get value out of it, to make you a better human being, when it gives you an equal opportunity, regardless of who you are, where you're from, what's your skin color, what you think, what you believe, everyone is equal. I think that's really the dream from tech perspective. When everyone is treated the same without um, favoring one group over the other or one opinion over the other. That's when real democracy happens rather than selective one, I would say.
We are so happy to have you join us today, Issam. Thank you for sharing a little bit of your story of UpScrolled. We certainly will be cheering you on and consider us your friends. We hope to continue to be in touch. Thank you for joining Utopias today, Issam.
I appreciate it, Ramesh and Joanne. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Shukran. All right. Thank
That's
you.
it. So
That's
shall we
it.
cut here? Yeah.
That's it.
All good.
Thank you
All
so
right.
much.
Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank you.
guys. I enjoyed that. Have a
It
good
was
day.
wonderful. We'll be in touch too. Thank you so much. Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Ramesh. Bye. Bye.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. Your support means the world to us. Our podcast is really focused on creativity, on care, on stories of inspiration, and inspiring characters of all kinds. It's such a wonderful, wonderful way to reach community. This is a labor of love. So the real way we can sustain ourselves is through all of your support. Please rate, ideally 5 stars. Please share this with anyone and everyone you know, and feel free to reach out to us also with suggestions on guests. Reach us at podcastutopias@gmail.com. Thank you, everybody, for your support.